which I understand will have Dean presenting to us again. And I'm really interested in this, I guess, Dean, from the perspective of how COVID-19 is now likely to impact, in particular, the timeframes around this. So obviously hand over to you to speak to the paper, and if you have any additional detail around COVID-19 specifically, that would be great to hear as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. So this paper, as you've already highlighted, it has been sort of kind of superseded and blown out of the water, I guess, by COVID-19. But it's a series of seminars that we've had with the council, and it's sort of like a no surprise approach for developing the content of the district plan. So what we've done right from the start is sort of set a strategic framework so that we're working to a district plan which is achieving specific outcomes, key principles and strategic objectives. And as we've gone through the process, we come back with a little bit more detail around what that means in terms of formulating a specific policy approach for particular subjects or work streams, as we call them. So we've had a series of seminars from the end of December through until early March, and that was just to get more specific information about the district plan's content and what that means in terms of going out and consulting with key stakeholders around it. So this paper has kind of, as alluded to, has already been superseded by COVID-19, because we sent out letters to some 2,000 odd properties in Napier, and the emphasis for that stakeholder engagement was around provisions which had a public good element but would impact in some way on private properties. So we have set up, and we did invite people to drop in sessions, which unfortunately had to be cancelled because of COVID-19. We do have set up a website so people are able to go online, have a look at some discussion documents, summary discussion documents, and provide feedback through that forum. But I guess it's probably fair to say, given the amount of letters and contact that we had and distribution with stakeholders, that we would have expected a higher level of input at this stage. And it's unsurprisingly, because people have got more pressing issues, that it's sort of not a high priority. We have got a little bit of feedback filtering through our email and through the website. But the reality is it's certainly not of the level that we would have hoped for in getting meaningful engagement. So I guess what we need to do is, once the consultation period doesn't finish until the end of April, 1st of May is the sort of time frame we set around that, is have a look what information does come in, and then have another look in terms of how we can possibly re-engage and provide those opportunities for people to sort of get more involved in the process. So the work streams that we're going out and we're subject to that, to those, the public good components, were the landscapes, historic heritage, biodiversity, and also the new growth option within the Western Hills. So that all the people who are affected by that have been contacted. And what this paper really does was just sort of capture and get council to agree on what was discussed at workshops, so that we have a clear and agreed framework for the content of the district plan, both for the policy approach, but also to let people know where we as a council are thinking in terms of what we should be doing. So probably just happy to take any questions from there, unless...
Great, thank you. One question I have is just with regards to, I see that a review of HPUDs is quite critical in terms of some of what we're proposing within our district plan, and in particular around identifying those areas for residential growth. And I guess just highlighting, has there been any conversations with the other local councils signalling that we may wish to bring forward a review of HPUDs?
So we've had some sort of preliminary TAG discussions. It's a technical advisory group of staff from Regional Council, Hastings District Council and Napier, to try and start initiate actually the next review of HPUDs anyway. So It was last done in 2017, due to be reviewed in 2022. But to hit those milestones and to actually have some meaningful output at that time, we need to do a lot of work in preparation for that. So there is early considerations and engagement going on just quietly behind the scenes to try and sort of set up the HPUD's working group again and to start feeding information through that particular forum. And the reality is there's been a lot of policy development from national government, the central government, over the last few years, which does impact on HPUDs as well. There's a national policy statement on urban development capacity, productive soils, natural hazards. There's a lot of information that's ongoing. So we've started those discussions at a very low level, starting to build up, and we're trying to actually have the first meeting of the HPUD's working group. But once again, this COVID-19 situation has sort of effectively delayed the whole process for all of these sort of joint meetings, engagement, consultation. So what we really need to do is start working and trying to get the policy positions working behind the scenes, and then hopefully once we actually are up and running, can condense a time frame for how it works. Does that answer your question, Mayor?
It does, thank you. Are there questions from any other councillors?
Yes,
Your Worship, could I just have a quick comment on your last question, please?
Absolutely.
I just wanted to say that there is a lot of interest from Hastings District as well in reviewing the HPUDs, or at least having those discussions again as well. So as well as at the kind of the technical level, and I'm sure you're aware of that too at the elected members level. It's a very hot topic really, because Hastings, like us, have to also accommodate growth into the future and are constrained by their options at the current HPUDs level. Both cities want to go into the hills and get off the plains, I think, and so there is a kind of a combined desire to review HPUDs to get in line with the latest thinking, which is around that.
Yes, definitely. I agree. Councillor Tapani.
Thank you, Your Worship. Dean, on page 195 of the agenda, there are areas of interest or particular focus which have been identified in the report, whether it's character or whether it's areas of natural significance. I'm looking at our business districts across the city, and noticed that Maraenui is not one of the suburbs on the list. Is there any rationale for the exclusion of Maraenui, or why it doesn't fit within those characters?
So through you, Mia. So what the list on page 195 of the agenda is a heritage, historic character areas. And the basis for historic character areas is effectively a high threshold in the Resource Management Act. It becomes a Section 6 matter, which is effectively a matter of quite high national importance, but delve down to the local level. So we've employed specific heritage architects and heritage experts to review our existing heritage character areas and to try and come up with new ones or confirm the extent or otherwise of the existing ones. So it is quite a detailed technical work that requires expertise to determine representative building types. So for this one, the heritage character areas are residential based, and there's nothing specifically in the Maraenui area, but the nearest one would be the Mariwa State Housing Character Area. And what they do is represent a snapshot of time and being a cohesive example. So once they're identified, the idea being there'd be a higher level of regulation which would apply to the buildings and the development which would be permitted within the area, or to try and sort of effectively preserve the heritage characteristics for both current and future generations. So There has been a new area identified within the Napier South area, and a recommendation to look at a Napier South character area. So it's a point in time, and it needs to be community-based, but also based on actual technical expertise to determine what justifies inclusion as a heritage character area.
Thank you, Your Worship. No further questions from me. Thank you, Dean. I appreciate it.
Are there questions from any other councillors?
Yep.
Yep.
Councillor Taylor, followed by Councillor Bogue. You're on mute, Graham.
Yeah, sorry. Dean, just in relation to that Napier South character, are there any particular streets in particular that's going to focus on?
Yeah, so there is. I can't just name them off the top of my head at the moment, but what it normally does is getting the most cohesive area of a representative example in the city. So it's typically quite a small localised area, but just to capture the most representative examples. Under the current district plan, we've had wider areas identified and had an advocacy approach, and that's where you advocate for people to try and sort of preserve the heritage features, and the experience over the last 10, 20 years is such that it's been relatively ineffective. But I can come back and give you the name of those areas offline if you like.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thanks.
Councillor Bogue.
Yes, just a couple of things. With reference to HPUDs, there may well be people listening to this, if there's anybody left out there who don't know what HPUDs means, and it would be helpful for us to remember that not everybody knows these abbreviations. But before you go on to that, I just wanted to mention on page 189, it mentions that the social and policy, that the review will... sorry, my page is jumping around. The council to ensure the district plan fully aligns with any of its current strategic priorities, plans and policies. I guess I know we haven't actually sat down and voted on our strategy for the COVID-19 situation, but it seems to me that this is a really important event that may change the shape of our city in some ways in terms of where people live and work, and I assume that that statement would mean that we would be looking at this in the context. I know it's every 10 years and et cetera, and it's historical in some ways, but we do need to, of course, take into consideration the kinds of strategies that we're building up at the moment to deal with this pandemic. So I know we haven't voted for any strategies or policies, but I think that will happen, and those will need to be taken into consideration when we look at our district plan in terms of who's going to be living and working where. So that's it. And HPUDs, if somebody could explain that for members of the public who might still be listening. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. Through you, Mayor. So HPUD stands for the Heritonga Plains Urban Development Strategy, and it's a sub-regional approach where Hastings and Napier and also the Regional Council have worked together to produce an urban growth strategy, rather than looking and how it's historically been done, where Napier does its own urban growth strategy and Hastings does its own urban growth strategy. So it's a regional approach, and it is now effectively deemed as best practice and is sort of mandated in terms of the national policy statement as to how it should be done. So we've had that in place since the last 10 years. So it's been quite a beneficial document for that time. COVID, yes, it is a massive impact and a massive implication in terms of society. The full implications of that are still unclear at this stage, but the district plan is a sort of reviewed only every 10 or 15 years. So it sort of has a time frame which hopefully will outlast even COVID. And we just need to make sure that we keep moving and creating good planning provisions that will achieve a better community for Napier.
Thank you, Dean. Councillor Simpson.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Oh.
just a question to Dean around public consultation. You had organised, well, you've indicated that response is down currently through the different means of communication. You had planned 3 public drop-in sessions. They were cancelled as a result of COVID-19. I think that's all understandable. With the timeframes available for consultation, I notice, what is it, 1st of May is the end of consultation at this particular point in time. Is there any likelihood of rescheduling these public drop-in sessions or extending the deadline for consultation, as some people may prefer to have a discussion face-to-face, or they may be uncertain at the moment as to how to communicate with council?
Yeah, so through you, Mayor, it's certainly my preference that we try and re-engage with those people, because we sort of sent out letters and there was an expectation that a certain type of consultation would occur. Unfortunately, we just have not been able to deliver that, and also the fact that we don't at this point in time know how we can even undertake that for the next few weeks until we've got more certainty as to what's happening with COVID and what level of lockdown and what it actually means. So it would be, in my opinion, a good practice that we actually try and re-engage with all those people we've contacted and provide them another opportunity to provide feedback, rather than just simply extending the time frame now with no further contact, because as you've identified, some people do like the face-to-face opportunities to talk through and understand and have people explain issues to them directly.
Thanks, Dean. Richard Munich would like to provide some comment on the previous question.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would just wanted to go back to Councillor Bowe's question around the COVID relationships and really support what Dean's saying. In our preliminary view is that the district plan process has got momentum, and it's about the land use that's currently there and the things that we know, and they're probably not going to change as a result of COVID, certainly not in the immediate sense. And it is a district plan is not only important to keep momentum, but it is actually a very expensive exercise that council does. So you don't want to be dragging that out any longer than it has to be done. Having said that, you're absolutely correct in that the world has changed, and COVID is going to provide a whole bunch of things that we don't even understand yet in terms of the way our economy might work into the future. And perhaps it would be a good thing to do to have a look at the city vision, and in that document, in the first instance, start thinking about the things you want to revise and change, and allow that vision to go forward first, and then the district plan can always catch up with that later on if it needs to.
Thank you, Richard. I don't see anyone now that I've found where the raise hand function is. I don't see anyone else wanting to ask any questions, but is there, in case other people didn't know where the raise hand function was? No, very good. Okay, so if we could bring up the council recommendation. Thank you very much. And I invite the councillors, if there's anyone who would like to move the motion, please.
I'm happy to.
Okay, so Councillor Tuppeny and Councillor Simpson. Oh, Councillor Mawson. Sorry about that. Councillor Mawson, and seconded by Councillor Simpson. Would you like to talk to that, Councillor Mawson? No.
Sorry, I was having technical issues there. No, I mean it's an excellent example of the amount of work that's gone into that. And end of the day, yes, COVID is going to be a huge impact, but the reality is people need to live somewhere, and that's basically this document is setting that out. So I think it's pretty straightforward and really good piece of work.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you. I think it is an excellent piece of work. I think we've debated well in workshops why this process is important and what it means to us going forward as a city and a community. And I think it's important that we recognise that COVID has affected the consultation process, but I think it is really important that we've set expectations around public consultation, that at some point in time we have a deliberate plan of catch-up. And as the officer has indicated, that there will be an opportunity to re-communicate with the people that are affected directly, and have that they will have an opportunity at some point in the future to express their views through either drop-in sessions as previously proposed or through the consultation processes. So I think it's a good piece of work. I think it does set a future for us because it will have implications around long-term planning, around council infrastructure and other community services. So I think it's important that we get a really good foundation for the future of our community. Thank you to the officers that have put a huge amount of work into thinking, deliberating and discussing these matters with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Just trying to decipher the people that haven't actually put their name on their iPad. I've got someone with a raised hand.
Me.
Councillor Crystal.
I'd just like to say how much work and thank the team for how much work they've done on this. I found it very fascinating and interesting, the history that we've gone through in all our seminars to get through this. And I think a lot of us learned a lot about Napier and the history and moving forward. So I'd just like to thank the team for everything they did in putting this to us.
Very true. It has been a very robust and informative process for all of us through the various workshops and seminars. And I think we would all reiterate your sentiments there, Councillor Crystal. I don't see anyone else that's used the raise hand function. So if there's no one that wishes to talk to the recommendation, I will put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Against? Carried. Right, so moving on to agenda item 10. Which is,
sorry, Mayor, it's number 7.
Where are we up to? Oh, sorry, I skipped ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, getting ahead of myself.
Can't get rid of me that easy.
Right. I'll just scoot back on my, yes, my phone. So, Coastal Hazards Strategy update from the February Joint Committee meeting, and again we'll invite Dean Moriarty to present to the paper, please.
Thank you, Mayor. So Coastal Hazards Strategy is a strategy that was initiated in 2014 and has been working through a number of stages since that time. We've got down to the really hard part of the strategy, which is to respond and implement and create solutions and funding options around it. So we have had a series of workshops with the partner councils, which is Hastings District Council, the Regional Council, and also Napier City Council over the last year or so, and there have been divergent opinions from the partner councils as to sort of the concepts around public and private benefit, who pays, who should be rating people for what purpose. So in order to sort of restart the respond phase again, I guess what we're doing is having more higher level engagement with councillors in the joint committee. There's additional councillors been included from each of the partner councils. And also after each joint committee, there's now going to be a paper put onto council agendas so that all of the councillors are aware of the process that's going on around the coastal hazard strategy. And so they're not having seminars, which is sort of coming effectively cold and coming in cold to quite a hot topic, I guess, and being able to understand what's going on. So the paper itself is relatively straightforward. It's just sent forward and the meeting notes from the meeting held on the 4th of February. But also for this particular purpose, there's a technical requirement that each time after triennium elections that there needs to be the terms of reference for the committee needs to be readopted by the partner councils. So there's two parts to this particular recommendation. It's simply note the information from the joint committee meeting and then also adopt the terms of reference. In terms of the noting the meeting, it's also making sure that there's an officer available to respond to any questions arising from the meeting itself. So that's the purpose of getting in onto a regular council agenda. But I'd just like to sort of draw your attention onto page 202 of the agenda, and that's the summary notes from the meeting. And just draw your attention to the very bottom paragraph on the page saying the next meeting is due to be held on the 1st of May. And a workshop with partner councils was going to be held on the 3rd of March. That workshop was never held. That was delayed at the time because Mayor Hazelhurst's mother had died and had a funeral on that date. So it was going to be reconvened, but once again has been caught up with the COVID issue. And the option of having the joint committee is also, I guess, under question because of just sort of the technical need to pull all that joint committee together and how it will actually happen. And as I understand it, the regional council has temporarily suspended all council meetings other than a full council meeting. So this is a joint committee, so I'm not quite sure how that fits in with the scheme of things. As I understand it, there has been some discussion with the new chair of the joint committee, which is Councillor Jerif Beek from the regional council. And earlier indications are that he's keen to proceed with this meeting, but it's something that I don't have the answer for at this time, but just flagging for councils the fact that there may be a meeting held with this joint committee early in May.
Thank you, Dean. I have questions from Councillor Simpson and Councillor Tupney.
No, not I, Your Worship.
Okay. You need to unraise your hand.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. And Councillor Tupney?
No, thank you, Your Worship. Dean has addressed my questions. Thank you very much.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Oh, look at that, it worked. Just wanted to make the point that this is something that would possibly be good for our council to thresh out in a workshop at some stage as well, whether or not we still hold the same view on that contributory fund. As Dean said, it has been a point of contention. I think there's some agreement assuming we keep the same position between Napier City and HBRC, but we're not in agreement with HDC at this stage around how the contributions work. So just maybe a flag for staff that if we could tack that conversation on ahead of when we do get back together, which Jeff is keen for us to do as soon as possible, that might set us in good stead to go into that joint workshop already knowing how we as this new council feel about that contributory fund.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Okay, I don't see any further raised hands, so if we can pop up the officer's recommendation, please, and if I can ask for someone to move the motion.
I'm happy to move.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And seconder?
Happy to second. Happy to second.
Thank you,
yeah.
Councillor Wright. So Deputy Mayor Brosnan and Councillor Wright. And did you wish to speak to that, Deputy Mayor?
No, I'm okay, thank you.
Councillor Wright?
No, I'm okay, thank you.
Opening up to the other councillors. No, very good. Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. And against? Thank you. Right, moving on to item 8, which is the Kiwi House lease agenda item, and inviting Rachel Hayden to talk to the people for us, please.
Tēnā koutou, everybody. Can you hear me?
We can, yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. The purpose of this report was to provide you all with the proposed conditions of the lease between ourselves and the conservation charity Kiwis for Kiwi to occupy and operate within our offsite Kiwi facility that the aquarium currently manages. The recommendations are to approve in principle the proposed conditions of the lease to this third-party operator, and note that a draft lease will come back to the Council for approval pursuant to the Reserves Act 1977. The challenge for us presently is our team. We have a vacant facility manager position, and we have 2.5 bird keepers who support the delivery of this activity off-site. They're based at the aquarium. However, the location of the facility is stretching resources a lot during the breeding season, and our brown kiwi have quite a long one between June to March. So it means quite a lot of travel to undertake the incubation, hatching and creaching of birds. We have 4 breeding pairs out there, and they can breed up to 3 times in a season, so up to 6 eggs, so they can be quite prolific. And in terms of, feeding twice a day, turning eggs, the resource has been quite challenged. The aquarium has managed this facility since 2010, when it was taken over from the reserves manager's retirement. And this was because of the skill that had been developed in the team since 2002, when the expansion afforded the building of our nocturnal house there. The main challenge we have is the limited time and resource, and this lease offers us an opportunity to save some considerable costs associated with the site through labour costs, but also materials and consumables required by the husbandry and care of birds at the site. It doesn't trigger any significance in engagement policy. The significant implication is financial. There are some savings for us to be made if the lease is to proceed. There's no real risk associated with the site, and our options are we could continue to deliver the status quo. But however, this does not meet any local government purpose or long-term plan outcomes, and it does have comparatively high costs for limited benefit. We can exit the Kiwi activity altogether. There are some costs for the maintenance of the vacant building, or we can allow this conservation charity, Kiwis for Kiwi, to be a third-party operator on a peppercorn lease. The development of our preferred option is to support the conservation charity to deliver their operations out of our site. In a nutshell, they are considering to rear 30 to 40 chicks there per year, getting them to a size that they can be released into kohanga sites on Mahia Peninsula. And the leasing of our site for a 5-year period will allow them to actually meet half of the required capacity for the Kiwis for Kiwi program for the region. So it is significant. In terms of what the relevant parties would be responsible for, ultimately they would be responsible for operations, recruitment, hiring and management of their own staff, health and safety, operational costs, and maintenance for non-fixed assets, pest control, the permitting required by the Department of Conservation to run this activity out of the site. They will hold public liability insurance, but they will also, an advantage to us, is help deliver free training of our aquarium team, our bird keeping team, and Kiwi care and husbandry. We would provide the facility and the husbandry equipment at a peppercorn rental. We foresee it will take us time. The 9 birds that are currently at the site, we will need to work with the Zoo and Aquarium Association, who manage these captive birds, for us to move them to alternative sites. But Kiwis for Kiwi have said that they understand that transition is required. So there may be a cohabitation of the site for up to 12 months while this happens. We would still need to retain 1 or 2 runs at the site for our nocturnal birds that are kept up here at the aquarium. And we would support the maintenance of the building asset, including repairs to the outer predator proofing. Our insurance on the building and any care of our captive birds held on site in the runs. But together there's opportunity for us to work on an agreed communications plan for the outcomes of the site as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Rachel. Councillor Crown, I see you have a question.
Kia ora through you, Madam Mayor. Rachel, I just wondered if there had been any discussion with Kiwi for Kiwi around the starting time due to the COVID situation at the moment.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, Councillor Crown. Initially, it was August to September was the sort of time that they were hoping to move in as such with the approval of the lease. However, COVID, they're unsure at the moment what COVID-19 means for them. I did speak to one of their board and their Eastern Region coordinator this morning. They're still keen for the activity to happen, but the impact of COVID is not fully understood yet. So still loosely August, September, providing we can get the lease approved in that time.
Cool. Thank you, Rachel.
Councillor Tapani.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've got a couple of questions, and not all of them may necessarily be able to be answered on the fly here. But I've got some questions around, first of all, the current facility. Great report. Really excited about the Kiwi for Kiwis opportunity and where this could take us as a city, and particularly our commitment to the restorative works of Kiwi care in New Zealand. So my questions were related to when I was first selected to Napier the last triennium. We came out to this facility, we were given a tour and some in-depth detail around Napier City's investment in that space, including the purchasing and development of the hatchery, the egg hatchery, and changes in our national ranking for Kiwi care against a national index, and we weren't ranked well, but after those investments into the facility, we stepped up our ranking in the program quite significantly. So my question relates to around the level of investment, which I couldn't quite pick out of the report. So this information may need to come back to us, but I would like a better understanding of what is our level of investment in this facility prior to this opportunity, because I know we purchased quite a bit of equipment as well as facilities, and how much of that is being handed over as a part of this arrangement. Perhaps we could start there.
Certainly, through you, Madam Mayor. In terms of level of investment in the facility for equipment and spaces themselves, I'm not sure. I don't have the answer to that question. I'm sorry, Councillor. However, in terms of what it's costing us now, it's around $52,000 in terms of consumables and materials for feeding of the birds, etc. Vet services for Kiwi are free. But its labour costs are approximately $150,000 per annum, but that's linked to a vacant position and the 2.5 keepers that work across both sites. In terms of our conditions of our lease, there's some specified chattels that we've drafted as part of the conditions of the lease, and they do include hatching equipment, incubators, brooders, and the agreement that we've discussed is they would have use of those while they were there, and any repairs needed in the time while they were using them would be done, so the condition would be kept the same, but everything would be returned back to us at the end of the proposed 5-year period.
So, supplementary question, Your Worship. So, in that example, where does liability lie around the care and costs associated with maintaining not the facilities but the equipment in that statement? Who you said we would be loaning them to Kiwis for Kiwi, and mentioned that responsibility for maintenance of those devices would be with who?
With Kiwis for Kiwi. they would be maintaining those while they use them.
And further question, Your Worship. I have some questions around, you did talk around why the split in the facility, why half of it still remains with our team because of we've still got some care obligations to those animals in the interim. Is there any indicator outside of that 12-month period that might suggest, assuming that COVID impacts don't water down the desire for Kiwis for Kiwi, do we have any idea of when we might be looking at a full takeover of Kiwi for Kiwis, or when Napier City might be withdrawing from that space? Or do we have an intention to always have a role in that space because of any regional park development opportunities, et cetera, et cetera?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, there is, in terms of us pulling back within that 5-year lease period, it's proposed that the first year of that 5-year lease period, Kiwis for Kiwi would be leasing the space, and we would have access with permission and communication with them to operate for those 4 pairs and that single bird, the care and husbandry of those birds, while we needed to, until the stud book holder for the Zoo and Aquarium Association, who's based at Wellington Zoo, can find appropriate sites to move those birds onto. Through discussions with him, he feels that a 12-month period is realistic to move all 9 birds onto different sites. The breeding pairs likely kept together. Of course, there's no guarantees. It could be shorter than that, but he thinks 12 months is a reasonable time frame. So Kiwis for Kiwi would effectively be managing the space in that time, and you know, they have said to us, if there's times where our resources stretch so far that we can't put evening food bowls out, for example, that our relationship is with them is strong, that they are happy to do those tasks for us. So I don't foresee any issues in a cohabitation of that space for the time that it required to move our captive birds on to other sites.
Fantastic. And one further question. I know that we put a PGF application through around a regional park concept, and this Kiwi facility has huge value to New Zealand, Napier, and to this particular species. Where and when might we look to engage in conversations around other potential partners who could support Kiwi for Kiwis in the space alongside of us? And I'm thinking particularly of the likes of our Komiti o Te Whango o Te Muruai, Hawke's Bay Regional Council, Hawke's Bay Biodiversity, those types of philanthropic and other LTAs that might want to participate in a Kiwi restoration program.
Very big question, Councillor, through Madam Mayor. A number of those partners, such as Hawke's Bay Biodiversity, for example, we already work alongside with on a number of different things. So we have really strong relationships there. So all I can personally speak to that is, I think when we get into a position to understand how any other applications would progress in that area, we've got really strong relationships, others that still need to be developed, but we've got existing really strong relationships to understand what that could look like together.
Thank you very much. I appreciate those answers. No further questions, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Tapani. Councillor Brown.
Hi. I just want to prefix this with, I think it's an amazing facility and awesome work that goes on, and I think it speaks to our support of the environmental well-being. My question is around the negotiations and where we are down the track with that in terms of the lease. I'm just conscious of the fact that we are in COVID-19 and the community are looking for us to cut costs where we can. This isn't an essential thing for a council, and I know it's $10,000, which but plus maintenance costs, and I'm just wondering where we are in the negotiations of that, and if there's any room to look at how this could potentially cost us less until we're through this session or season.
Through you, Madam Mayor. To be honest, Kiwis for Kiwi have been really open and flexible in their negotiations. In terms of our maintenance on site, it's things like groundskeeping, making sure that our external predator proofing is intact. And we do have an opportunity to work with our own maintenance team and our aquarium volunteers to actually undertake some of those tasks to reduce those costs. For example, maintenance of plant material and trimming back, plant and weed growth in enclosures. We can work with our team of volunteers to help undertake some of those maintenance tasks. So it's that we could cut that cost potentially completely for some of those jobs as opposed to asking Kiwis for Kiwi to take on more on the chin. Does that answer your question, Councillor Brown?
Yeah, I think so. So just to clarify, that $10,000, that's the maintenance costs, and if we pulled it in-house, that would look significantly lower. Is that the idea?
Yeah, it's through you, Madam Mayor. It's painting buildings, repairing roofs. It's that sort of level of support. And as we have responsibility for the building, anything that could not be augmented by volunteer support would have to be covered by us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. If there's no further questions, I'll ask for the officer's recommendation to be brought up on the screen. Excellent. Thank you. And I'll ask for a councillor to move the motion, please.
I'm happy to move.
Thank you, Councillor Mawson. Seconded by?
I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Did you wish to speak to that, Councillor Mawson?
Sure. I think for some of Napier, they may not actually realise that this facility is actually out there, and I think it's brilliant work. I just think it's time that we've go back to the business of the council and move that on to a third party to take care of those Kiwis who obviously have a vested interest in that. And it's really good work.
Okay. Councillor Wright.
Only just a quick thank you and shout out to all of those that have made this happen. I think it's a really good solution. Thank you very much.
Yes, absolutely. I think this is a fantastic outcome. So is there anyone else that wished to speak to the motion? No? Okay, I'll put that. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Excellent. Against? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. Okay, moving on to agenda item 9, the landfill levy proposal, interim submission to Ministry for the Environment, and invite Cameron Burton to present the paper to us, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, councillors and staff. This paper to council refers to an opportunity that Napier City Council had to develop a submission to the Ministry for the Environment regarding their proposal to change the way landfill levy is managed throughout New Zealand. We had an option to either submit our thoughts on behalf of council or not, and we made the decision to do so and facilitate a meeting with the Honourable Eugenie Sage, Associate Minister for the Environment, specifically to discuss how this proposal could impact upon Napier. And we did this in collaboration with Hastings, Wairoa and Central Hawke's Bay District Councils. As each of the Ministry's proposed changes impact differently upon each council's current methodologies, submissions were completed separately. Timeframes to complete a submission were very tight and were over the Christmas shutdown period, so we applied to provide an interim submission to Ministry for the Environment, which would enable for City Councillors' ability to amend or endorse that interim submission on behalf of our community and offer transparency of this process at a later date, being today. As a matter of a summary, the Ministry's proposal is to raise the cost of the landfill levy, which is currently set at $10 per tonne of all waste which goes to landfill. There are 6 proposed options that are being considered. Each of those will increase the cost of the levy being received by central government per tonne. In an effort to disincentivise the discharge of waste to landfill and increase income into the regions for the purposes of new initiatives and activities to further minimise waste being sent to landfill. In creating the interim submission to Ministry for the Environment, we were required to answer several questions predetermined by the Ministry. The answers to these questions, which form our submission, are included in the paper to Council and can be found in your papers as item 9 in attachment A. Sorry, I don't have a page number for that. In summary, in this interim submission, we support the Ministry for the Environment for the proposal. However, we have challenged the policy writers in our submission to ensure that they are aware, particularly of social, financial, environmental and enforcement factors that need to be considered due to the implications of increased fees being passed down to those who create the waste.
Thank you, Cam, and congratulations. I thought the interim submission was very good, and it was great that you were able to get something in around the time pressures and the timing of Christmas. So thank you for that. I'll open up to questions. I've got Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Thank you. Cameron, I like the submission as well, and I wonder if you might touch on for us you speak about the kind of perverse outcome of raising levy fees in terms of roadside dumping and illegal dumping, and I think that's something that comes front of mind for people when they think about raised prices at the landfill. So I just wonder if you wouldn't mind touching on that for us.
Certainly, yeah. It's through you, Madam Chair. Sorry, the likelihood of increased roadside dumping and illegal dumping within our facilities when the price goes up at the gate for people doing the right thing at a transfer station or a landfill is probably quite high, and we've tried to touch on that and challenge the Ministry in that in relation to that. The feedback that we received from the Associate Minister was that as well as waste minimisation activities for the city that could be funded by the income coming back from waste levy if the proposal goes ahead, is that we could potentially use that for additional staff members and additional enforcement action to be carried out. That raises other challenges, obviously, but also my feedback to them was that there is a requirement for some alignment between the Litter Act, the Resource Management Act, and the Local Government Act to facilitate the enforcement that's required. So it's part of a bigger picture, but the likelihood of increased fly tipping, if there is an increase in cost at a big stepped rate rather than ramped in over a period of years, does remain quite high.
Thank you.
Right. I can't see anyone else wanting to ask any questions. So if we could have the officer's recommendation up on the screen, please. Thank you. And so this is the endorsement of the interim submission. And do I have someone to move the motion, please? I will. Thank you, Councillor Crystal. And a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Crown. Would you like to talk to that, Councillor Crystal?
Just like to thank Cameron and his team for doing this. I think it's a great submission, and hopefully we get a result from this.
Thank you. Councillor Crown?
Nothing further to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Did anyone else wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Tapani?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just in line with the mover and the seconder, I want to congratulate our staff on taking the initiative and speaking with Minister Sage around the impacts of us being able to get this feedback in. I did have some I'll finish off by saying that I'm going to speak in favour of this motion, and I look forward to growing this opportunity for our city going forward. There are a number of impacts outside of just the cost indicators. So looking forward to how we might be able to work progressively with the Ministry for Environment to better use such things as the levy to drive better environmental outcomes at a local level. So well done on the work, team, and I look forward to supporting you going forward. Ngā mihi nui.
Thank you very much, Happy.
Thank you, Councillor Tapane. So there's no one else wishing to speak to the motion. I will put that. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. Against? Carried. Right, so now we're up to agenda item 10, which I know Councillor Price will have been sitting and waiting for with great anticipation, Indoor Sports Working Group. And I would like to take a moment to actually acknowledge the role that Councillor Price has taken in driving this and really being a champion for looking at the indoor sports facilities that we have available for our community. So, Keith, you certainly never let us forget that this was something that we needed to be pushing ahead with. And I'd like to invite Glenn Lucas to talk to the paper for us, please.
Kia ora tātou, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, wonderful. So, yes, the paper that we've put together is to approve the formation of an indoor sports working group to look at the indoor sports provision in Napier. I've just seen a message from Levy around an amendment to the recommendation. So I did speak to Keith very briefly yesterday just to make sure that we're all aligned. So Keith, do you want to talk about the amendment to the recommendation?
Yeah, okay, then just to get this moving a lot quicker, because it has sat around for a few years and we have budgeted money for it, I have an amendment. And Dev, have you got that to put up, or? Does anyone need me to read that, or can they read it all right?
I think we can probably read it all right.
Yeah, so I'd move that recommendation. If I've got a seconder.
I'm happy to second it.
Okay. Obviously, Glenn will finish his... you got a bit more to say, Glenn?
Well, it sounds like it's almost done, but I'm more than happy
Not
to,
quite.
If need be.
It's good that you can see the recommendation to be able to speak with it as well.
Right. Okay. So really, this goes back to the multi-use sports facility, which, as you all know, had indoor space built into it. Once that was the plug was pulled on that, it sort of moved into PGA or the RISEC, which is the trust that looks after PGA, into looking at expanding their facility. As Keith alluded to, we have pledged a bit of quite a bit of money in the long-term plan to support some sort of indoor sports solution. So really, this has come back to us a little bit, and the question is, how can we assist this? And the paper is around a recommended process for us to really get alongside and assist the solution. So all the documents and reports and anecdotal evidence talking to other sports all points to there is a real demand, largely driven or almost exclusively driven through organised sports. So PGA have developed plans to expand the current facility to meet this demand. As I've said, we have committed some funding of 4.1 million to the project. There are some issues with the proposed PGA development that need to be worked through, and that's where they've come to us really for a bit of support to start to progress this project. So there are some site constraints, which are some of the issues which need to be worked through. And so really this paper is a relatively simple one, and it's just proposing that we put together a bit of a cross-agency working party to have a good look at the issues, to investigate the proposed PGA solution and see whether those issues are surmountable or not, and we can get going with that. Or alternatively, if it's not, then what other options are there of producing and addressing this need. So that's really it in a nutshell. If you want to know more, please, fire some questions at me.
Great, thank you, Glenn. I can't see anybody at this stage indicating that they have any questions of Glenn.
Happy has.
Oh, Councillor Tapani.
I'm so sorry, Your Worship. So, and to our councillors, you're sick of seeing my face, I'm sure. I'm hoping you'll be able to answer this question for me, Glenn. Great work. Really encouraged to see this item on the agenda and really keen to support Councillor Price in progressing this forward. My question is around, when I got elected at the last triennium, this was on the discussion table as we deliberated on the velodrome. It has been 4 years in ongoing tasks and conversations, and which Councillor Price alluded to in his introduction. What I'm asking from our staff is, can you provide us with any confidence that that 4 years, which has been spent engaging with the arena, that the bulk of the issues are addressed, and that there is greater confidence from our staff around better progression of this project going forward, so we're not looking at another 4-year delay over issues? What confidence can you give us that the next stage of this is going to be a lot better than the last 4 years?
Okay, through you, Madam Mayor. And Keith, feel free to jump in if you do have anything. So this was really, since the MUSIF, the plug was pulled on the MUSIF, this really was led through RISEC and through the PGA Trust Board. So we were working alongside them. I haven't had too much involvement up to date, so I maybe don't have the full context of what's been happening to date. But really, it was driven by PGA and RISEC. There has been Napier City Council involvement from here and there along the way to try and clear some of these obstacles, but really this is an effort to say, right, where are we at? RISEC have put their hand up and said that they're a trust that's set up to operate a facility. They don't necessarily have the skills on board, nor the capacity necessarily to lead a construction project like this. So this is where potentially Napier City Council could come along, can fold in our skills and resources and try to expedite the solution.
Just further to that, is that all right, Madam Mayor, if I just comment on that?
Yes.
This has been, just to answer you, Uppy, it's been let lie. This working group is to get it motivated. It's to give PGA help, which they've been asking for, and we will set timelines so that there's results coming out and get it moving. Thank you.
Yeah, and further to that, just bearing in mind, of course, we're now working within quite a different environment as well, so that unfortunately may impact how quickly we would like to be doing this. Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, just basically questions, and I know we're establishing a working group, and that's probably the primary outcome of this actual document, but reading through the plethora of reports, and some of which were a little bit difficult to gauge when those reports were actually authored. But there's a couple in there around operating costs, and I think something we need to be very mindful of is the fall of operating costs. For instance, one of the statements in there is Napier City Council and Hastings District Council will be requested to increase their operational contributions to PGA from 55,000 to 105,000. So we've just got to be careful here about where costs will fall. And I think if we're developing a facility for users, particularly in the sports environment, I know sports are very expensive with their fees and levies, but I think we need to make sure that the general ratepayer isn't subsidising to a too larger amount the cost of operating such a facility. And I'm sure these are questions that the working party will work through anyway, but I just want to reiterate my concern is that we don't go into an agreement with an escalating operational cost that will fall on the general ratepayer.
Yeah, thank you, Nigel. And through you, Madam Mayor, I couldn't agree more with any of that. So very much the focus of the working group will be to understand not just the capital cost to get this thing built, but also the ongoing cost, the total cost of ownership, and where those costs are gonna lie. So some detailed financial modelling, which some of that work has been done and getting to this stage, but it really needs a good shake, and it really needs to make sure that going forward it is as sustainable as it possibly can be, and any additional investment from any councils are really focused on the benefits that it can deliver. But again, it will have to come back to this table, to this forum, before we invest any additional money. So it will come back for any decision and debate.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Are there any further questions? I don't see anybody with their hand raised, and we've obviously already had a mover and seconder. Councillor Price, did you wish to speak any further to the motion?
I think I picked up the point when you said any further. No, I'm quite happy.
No, not at all.
No, I think
Taylor.
I've probably said enough.
Councillor Taylor, did you wish to talk to the motion?
Yes, thank you. I am here. So I just think it's important that, this is the establishment of a working party, a working group. And I'm not sure whether Councillor Price's amended motion includes the establishment of the terms of reference, but I think that's one of the most crucial things that we need to look at. Everybody's made comment about COVID-19 and how it's going to affect community, and I think people should be really understanding that sport as we know it presently will change considerably, particularly in the short term, and also that Sport New Zealand are reconsidering their sports strategy that they were about or in the process of releasing. So those things have to be taken into consideration by this working group. It is a great opportunity to get the terms of reference right and progress this particular project because the need is there, but let's also recognise that sport will be considerably different in the future and in the immediate future when you think about the gathering of people and how many can be in a place at one time. And that's going to affect all sport from community participation right through to international sport. So I think we need to be very cognizant of that fact. But I'm happy to support the amended motion.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor McGrath, did you raise your hand?
Yeah, absolutely. Just through you, Madam Mayor. Give or take COVID-19, I'm not sure what the outcome will be in 12 months or 4 years or whenever this project perhaps gets built. But when I throw the child-friendly city lens across our need for more court space, we're screaming out for it. Kids in sport are kids out of court. There's all this information that says it's a great thing. And we blew an opportunity a few years ago when we tied some courts up with a velodrome, and as Glenn said, we pulled the plug. But we sent the baby out with the bathwater, and we're no further down the track with our indoor courts. It's not good when you turn up to PGA at 8 o'clock in winter and you're watching intermediate kids having to walk back home to Mariwa, Maraenui and Kurumai because they haven't been able to play their games earlier because of lack of court space. We've lost our indoor cricket arena. So we need to get our balance right here and get these courts sorted. And again, I take into consideration what Councillor Taylor has said with regards to what effect COVID may have. But I think by the time this working group gets up and going, I think we're going to know very clearly where we sit. And I fully endorse this process.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Right, I don't see anyone else with their hand raised, so I will put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Excellent. Against? Carried. Thank you. So we're getting there. 2 more agenda items, folks, and then we can have a break before public excluded. So our next agenda item is the lease of reserve, the Scout Association of New Zealand. This is pretty straightforward, but I will invite Brian Faulkner to give us just a quick rundown.
Good afternoon. Look, this is simply a procedural matter required under the Reserves Act. There are no issues, simply renewing the lease for the West Shore Sea Scouts. Have been there for pretty much ever. So it is just a formality, and the reason it comes before council, these simple matters come before council, is that council is acting under delegated authority from the Minister of Conservation in authorising leases of reserves. So really just a procedural matter, but happy to answer any questions.
Right. I don't see anybody with their hand raised. I think this is pretty straightforward. Oh, Councillor Tapney.
I know. Apologies again. I did say after our last break, I had no more questions for the remainder of this agenda.
Guilty, Your Honour.
My question is related to the time frame specifically that the club has had use of this reserve and how open they are to sharing those facilities or that reserve with other groups. I'm conscious of the portion and size of the club in relation to the size of the city, the club in connection with other water-based activities and access for other clubs to such facilities. So what is the environment like with the Scouts Club around working progressively with other water-based activities in our community?
Well, I think they're open to that. In terms of this lease, it's purely relating to the footprint of their club rooms. I've been in their club rooms. They're chock-a-block with their own storage and what have you. I have no doubt they would share the hall area. I know they're working with the Dragon Boat Club ladies, the cancer recovery ladies next door, and I think there's also a Walker group on the land next door. But the Sea Scouts don't have exclusive use of that land next door, purely the footprint of their clubhouse.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. No further questions from me, Your Worship.
Your Worship, I just, for a point of clarification through you, in the report, there seems to be, or actually in the recommendation, we relate to the Scout Association, and other parts it relates to Sea Scouts. So is that just a miss out? Because if we pass a resolution, they are two different types of organisations.
No, the through you, we have to enter into leases with a legal entity. It's got to be an incorporated entity that we enter into leases with. And the West Shore Sea Scouts is affiliated to the Scout Association of New Zealand. Okay. So with a lot of our the community organisations now, we enter into these leases with the national body because that is the incorporated legal entity, and the West Shore Sea Scouts are simply affiliated to that. So the New Zealand Scout Association is the correct legal entity for council to enter into the lease with.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you. If there's no further questions, I have an indication from Councillor Brown that she would like to move this motion. So thank you for that, Councillor Brown. Do we have a seconder?
I see Councillor Bogue.
Yeah. Can I did have my hand up, Your Honour, Your Worship.
Do you have a quick question, Councillor Bogue?
I just had a particular comment, just for those of you who wonder about that facility. I have been in there once with a group of people doing governance training. So it is the actual facility is leased out to other community groups who want to use it. And as well as that, for those of you who came to the Waipureku, the Clive event on Waitangi Day, the Sea Scouts, which seems to be a very active group of girls and boys, were present there. They seem to, they're out on the water quite often. I mean, not at the moment, but they are a very active little community group that picks up particularly I think it's under 14-year-olds to get them out on the water. So I support this resolution and think it's a great little group, and I'm glad they're there.
Thanks, Councillor Bogue. And were you seconding the motion? Thank you. Councillor Brown, did you wish to speak to that?
Probably just in line with what Maxine was saying. I'm a former Girl Guide, and I see a lot of value in the work that the Scouts do. And we had a town huddle there a couple of weeks ago, I suppose it was. Time's gone a bit weird. And the Scout leader was very kind and showed me around all of the facilities and the collaborations he's doing with other units. So in line with what you were asking, Api. So, yeah, I fully support this motion, and that's about it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bogue, did you have anything further to add? No? Any comments from anybody else? Councillor Tapani?
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'm speaking in favour of this motion and the officer's report. I would like to make mention of something connected to the report, and that's to provide acknowledgements, one towards what clubs like this provide to vitality and connectedness within our communities. And so really happy to support any sort of club or association that looks to build community connection and resilience within our residents. But also I want to take the opportunity to acknowledge a key service connected to our scouts that could do with note, and that is our Coast Guard service and our water-based response services. So our Scout Club grows interest and capability of people engaging in water-based recreation activities, and this is dependent upon the continued voluntary and paid services of our Coast Guard. So an extension on the Scouts is acknowledgement towards our harbour and our Coast Guard services. Thank you, Your Worship.
No problem. Okay, we've had 3 in favour. Is there anyone that wishes to speak against the motion? No? Okay, I will put that then. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. Against? Carried. So we're on to our last agenda item, which is the Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Joint Committee draft minutes from the 23rd of March 2020. So interestingly, this particular committee meeting, we watched the announcement by the Prime Minister that we would be going into level 4 within the next couple of days. So it was great to have all that group together at that time to be able to really hit the ground running in terms of our planning as a region for how we were going to work through and cope with level 4 lockdown. And I would just like to comment actually on how well things are working at a regional level. The regional leaders, so we were meeting nightly at the start of the lockdown, so that was all the mayors, the chair of the regional council, the chair of the DHB, police, MSD, our local MPs, and Ngāhiwi Tomoana from Ngāti Kahanunu. So we were meeting nightly to discuss what was needing to be done and what planning was underway in terms of our regional response to COVID-19, and that has been incredibly valuable and has actually been acknowledged at a national level that we were really taking the lead in terms of how we were approaching this from a regional perspective. We have now dropped down to 3 nights a week, thankfully, because it was starting to get pretty tiring, but it's also, I guess, a recognition that the systems and processes are becoming more embedded, and it's, there's some really good things happening in that space. So just a bit of a general update from me in terms of the way this particular group and the CEDM group themselves, who have been incredible, have been working in response to the COVID-19 environment. So I see that Cherie Ball is down to talk to the paper. So I'll invite you, Cherie, if there's anything in particular that you wanted to comment on.
I can speak to that, Deborah here, Madam Mayor. So the joint committee minutes are a procedural matter, so they come through the governance team, but I think we have nothing further to add than your fantastic summary. Thank you.
So did anyone have any questions in particular? No? Excellent. Okay, well, I'm happy to move the motion to receive the draft minutes.
Happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. I've already said my bit, so I won't drag it on any longer. Did anyone else wish to talk and support or against the motion?
I'm happy to support it, but I'm interested that they didn't have at the bottom when the next meeting was going to be.
Yeah. We normally meet monthly, so it would have been due to be around the 20-something of April. So, yes.
I think you've done the year's worth.
Yeah, clearly it'll be happening, but it'll be happening in the virtual sense. So, if there's no further comments, I will put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. Oh, yeah, habit. Against. Excellent, carried. So thank you. That brings us to the conclusion of our open agenda. We are rescheduled to get back online at 2 p.m. for public excluded. Could I just ask someone to move for us to go? Thank you, Councillor Price, seconded by Councillor Bogue. So we have therefore got a small break now for anyone that would like to go off and grab a bite to eat and get ready for our next meeting, which will kick off at 2 p.m. So we'll see you all in, and thank you everybody for your participation and, as always, excellent questions.
Is it on Zoom or is it on?